You're listening to The Rich Life Revolution with me, Michelle Cooper. My mission is to empower you to step into your next level of wealthy. You'll hear all the deets, a little bit of inspiration, and real life takeaways so that you can create your own rich life revolution. Let's dig in. Are you moving through a period of transition? We all go through transitional stages of life. Whether you're experiencing a big loss, like the death of a loved one, or a divorce, or perhaps selling your business, losing your job, quitting your job, a health crisis, any form of change in your life that feels monumental can be described as a life transitional phase. Both men and women go through transitional stages in life. In fact, my ex-husband is going through one now as he is in the empty nest transition. Yes, men can go through the empty nest syndrome as well. I have moved through many transitional phases in my life, and this is an opportunity for us to create the next phase of our life, the next step. And although there might be sadness, overwhelm, and confusion, these life transitional moments provide us with opportunity and new possibilities. So let's talk about the 5 stages of transition and see where you're at. These transitional stages of life are very similar to grief, and they can be divided into those 5 stages of grief. While everyone moves through these stages differently, there are some commonalities in these stages. And the order of feelings experienced during these transition periods can change. So if we go back in time a little bit, in 1969, a Swiss-American psychiatrist named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross identified that there are 5 stages of grief. Her theory of grief became known as the Kubler-Ross model. And while it was originally devised for people who were ill, these stages of grief have been adapted for other experiences with loss, such as major life transitions. The 5 stages of transition are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally, acceptance. So let's dive into these stages. You can identify where you might be and perhaps how you can handle it just a little bit better. Now, I just want to mention here that these stages are not consecutive. You could bounce around between many of them and you can repeat them. So don't think that, when I talk about stage 1 as denial, that's where you have to start, because that might not be where you're at. Life transition is an overwhelming and emotional time. And it's not unusual to respond to the strong and often sudden feelings by pretending the change isn't happening. Denying it gives you time to more gradually absorb the news and begin to process it. This is a common defense mechanism, and it helps numb you to the intensity of the situation. It's your body trying to protect you. It's also completely normal to deny the severity of the situation or the implications. My best friend Wendy says normal is just a setting on the washing machine. There is no normal. So in this first stage, which we're calling denial, this is where numbing ourselves comes in. We distract ourselves from the reality of the situation, perhaps with work, food, alcohol, drugs, sex, anything that distracts us from the feeling of loss. As you move out of the denial stage, the emotions you've been hiding will begin to rise. You'll be confronted with a lot of sorrow, probably what you've been denying. This is also part of the journey of transition, but it can be difficult. So when I went through my divorce, I definitely went through the denial phase and I numbed myself with overworking and food. That was my coping mechanism. So I get it. It's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. It's just part of the process. The second stage is anger. Now, where denial may be considered a coping mechanism, anger is a masking effect. Anger is hiding many of the emotions and pain that you carry. This anger may be redirected at other people, such as the person who's left you or the person who you feel is responsible for the situation. You may even aim your anger at inanimate objects. While your rational brain knows the object of your anger isn't to blame, your feelings in that moment are just too intense to act according to that. Anger may mask itself in feelings like bitterness or resentment. It may not be clear-cut fury or rage. Not everyone will experience this stage of transition, and some people may linger here a bit longer. As the anger subsides, however, you may begin to think more rationally about what's happening and feel the emotions you've been putting aside. If I use my divorce as an example here, I wasn't angry. I completely skipped over this. However, I did have a touch of resentment. Must be nice to just move on. Must be nice that everybody's looking after you. Here I am, holding it all together, looking after everybody, looking after all the kids. So I guess you could say that resentment was my version of anger. The third stage is called bargaining. During transition, you may feel vulnerable and helpless. In those moments of intense emotions, it's not uncommon to look for ways to regain control or to want to feel like you can affect the outcome of an event. In the bargaining stage of transition, you may find yourself creating a lot of what if and if only statements. It's also not uncommon for people who have solid religious beliefs to try to make a deal or promise to God or some form of higher power in return for a healing or relief from this transition and pain. Bargaining is a line of defense against the emotions of transition. It can help you postpone the sadness, the confusion, or the hurt. So we'll go back to using my divorce as an example. Now, although I didn't say this, I have heard friends say this. If only I had spent more time with him, he would have stayed. If only I had done this or that. If only this didn't happen. That's a really common bargaining statement. So stage 4 is depression. Now, who wants to go there? Not me, really. And whereas anger and bargaining can feel very active, depression may feel like the quiet stage of transition. In these early stages of loss, you may be running from your emotions, trying to stay a step ahead of them. By this point, however, you may be able to embrace and work through them in a more healthful manner. You may also choose to isolate yourself from others in order to fully cope with the transition. That doesn't mean that depression is easy or well defined. Like the other stages of transition, depression can be difficult and messy. It can feel overwhelming. You may feel foggy, heavy, and confused, a lack of energy. Depression may feel like the inevitable landing point of any kind of loss or transition. However, if you feel stuck here or can't seem to move past this stage of transition, I really recommend you talk with a mental health expert. A therapist can do wonders and can really help you move through this period of coping. For sure, I went through this with my divorce. There was this feeling of fogginess. Life felt really confusing. I felt like a lot I had to do and I didn't know where to start. And sometimes I just didn't even want to deal with life. The fifth stage is acceptance. Hallelujah. Acceptance is not necessarily a happy or uplifting stage of transition, though. It doesn't mean you've moved past the transition or the loss. It does, however, mean that you've accepted it and have come to understand what it means in your life right now. You may feel very different in this stage. That's entirely expected. You've had a major change in your life, and that upends the way you feel about many things. Look to acceptance as a way to see that there may be more good days ahead than bad. There still may be bad, and that's okay. It's an upward turn. At this point, the stages of transition like anger and pain have died down, and you're left in a more calm and relaxed state. You might be reconstructing your life and working through your change. You can begin to put pieces of your life back together, and you can begin to take steps to move forward. Acceptance and hope is a very gradual process. And it's the acceptance of a new way of life and a feeling of possibility for the future. So, I'm going to answer some questions that I have received from listeners about life transition. So, this question is from Monica. She is from Oklahoma. And she said, "How long does each stage of transition last, Michelle?" Well, I can't answer that. That's like asking how long is a piece of string. Life transition is very different for every person, and there's no exact time frame that it will adhere to. You may remain in one of the stages of transition for months, but skip other stages entirely. It's very typical, and it takes time to go through the process. So just allow yourself that time. My next question is from Kim, and Kim is from Texas. Is it possible to repeat the stages of transition? Not everyone goes through the stages of transition in a linear way. As I mentioned, you can jump all around. You may have ups and downs and go from one stage to another and then circle back. Additionally, not everyone will experience all stages of transition. Like I've said, you may not go through them in the same order either. For example, you may begin coping with loss and transition in the bargaining stage, and then find yourself in anger or denial next. Just allow it to be. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. This is a great question. I love this question. This question is from Tara from New Mexico. Hey, Michelle, I didn't go through the stages of transition like you've described. How will this affect me? Well, avoiding, ignoring, or denying yourself the ability to express your transition may help you disassociate from the pain of the loss that you're going through, but holding it in won't make it disappear. It will come out in another way. You can't avoid transition and loss forever. If you've ever read the book, Your Body Keeps Score, this is where your body is holding on to that energetic frequency. And over time, unresolved transition can turn into physical or emotional manifestations that affect your health. Mine manifested as weight gain. In order to heal from a loss and move on, you have to address it. If you're having trouble processing your loss and your transition, consider seeking help with a therapist. Another great question. This is from Jen in Montreal. Why is it important to understand the stages of transition, Michelle? Transition is a natural emotion to experience when going through some kind of change. While everyone experiences transition differently, identifying the various stages of transition can help you anticipate and comprehend some of the reactions that you may experience throughout the grieving process. It can also help you understand your needs. We all have different needs when grieving a loss or change, and we find ways to have them met. Understanding the stages of transition will ultimately help you work towards acceptance and healing. In wrap up, really the key to understanding life's transitional moments is realizing that no one experiences the same thing. Transition is very personal, and you may feel something different every time. You may need several weeks, or sometimes it can last for years. However, I want to remind you, if you've decided that you need help coping with the feelings and changes that are going on, a therapist, a counselor, a mental health professional is a really good resource for vetting your feelings and finding a sense of assurance in these very challenging times. Transition doesn't have to be hard. We can accept the process and experience the emotions fully and look to the possibilities of the future. I am really excited to share with you my life transition workbook, which, if you are going through any kind of change in your life, this workbook will be a godsend. It is gold, and it will give you guidance for every stage along the way, with journaling prompts, with exercises, and it will really help you understand what you're moving through. The link is in the show notes. Thanks for joining me today. I hope this helps, and I can't wait to hear from you. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you got at least one gold nugget today. Be sure to grab your copy of the Rich Life Revolution workbook to help you set the foundation for your next level of wealthy. Get it now at richliferevolution.ca, and I'll see you later.